I want to talk about Eddington. Eddington is Ari Aster's newest movie. He's the director of Hereditary, Midsummer, and Beau is Afraid. I have an interesting connection with Ari Aster. He kind of holds a little bit of a special place in my heart. When growing up, my family didn't watch horror movies at all. My friends weren't really into them, so I didn't really watch scary movies. Then when I started dating Savannah, who I'm now married to, her family was the exact opposite. They loved horror movies, and one of the first horror movies that I ever remember watching with them was Hereditary. Hereditary honestly might be the first horror movie I ever sat down and watched the whole thing, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, I love that movie. It got me into horror, so Ari Aster always has a special place in my heart, and I think I'm probably always going to go see his movies as long as he's making them because of that. So, saw Hereditary, saw Midsummer in theaters with Savannah, and we were both, shocked by what we saw, and it took me a couple days to even decide if I liked the movie. Saw Beau is Afraid, and wasn't my favorite movie. I didn't hate it as much as everyone else, but also didn't love it. I didn't like it as much as Midsummer or Hereditary. And now we're at Eddington. And I was lucky enough to see Eddington a couple of days early because of an event the Arkansas Cinema Society put on. And let me just say real quick, if you have a group locally that's able to do early screenings or just any type of screening like this where the people there are going to be locked in and 100% focused on the movie, you need to go. It is such a different viewing experience and I love going to the movie theater too, but these screenings are just different when everyone there is 100% focused. They're locked in. So if you have a local group that does this, you should go to those screenings. But Eddington is complicated, and how I feel about it is complicated. So this review is going to be a little different. I'm going to get into spoilers and stuff. Here's my general review that is spoiler-free. I like the movie. I think it's better than Beau is Afraid. I think it's a step in the right direction for Ari Aster when it comes to, I just think he learned a lot from Beau is Afraid. I think this movie's funnier. It is cleaner, I think. It's not as bloated. I think that Ari Aster learned a lot from Beau is Afraid. I would probably give it a 6 or 7 out of 10, I usually don't do halves, but this might be like a 6.5 or something. But yeah, I like the movie. I think you should see it. And once you go pause the video, go watch the movie, and then come back and argue with me in the comments about how much you disagree with me, or tell me how much you agree with me. So now we're going to get into and talk about some spoilers and stuff. So I first want to talk about the reviews for Eddington that I saw before I even watched the movie. And then I want to talk about what I liked about the movie, what I thought was really good, and some stuff that I thought could have been better. So the reviews for the movie are interesting. I've seen people that have liked it a lot, and I've seen people that have really hated the movie and didn't like it at all. A lot of the negative reviews I saw for this movie had a lot to say about Joaquin Phoenix's character. Mostly that he is not complex enough. I saw people say, Ari Aster said in an interview you're supposed to feel sorry for him. And they said they could not feel sympathy for someone like him. And I think that kind of sucks. I think that his character is complicated. He says a lot of stupid shit about COVID and the George Floyd protests and BLM. He says stupid shit about that. There's no way around it. He does. And it's easy to be mad at him about that. But I think his character also shows that he truly, really cares about his community. And he is trying to do what he thinks is best for his community. And there are a lot of real people out there like that. I grew up in the South. I still live in the South. I have different politics than most people in the South. And I think differently than a lot of people that I currently live around. And, from living here for a long time and talking to people and trying to understand people, you'll quickly realize there are a lot of people that like in the South and in other places like Eddington, these small towns that really care about their community, and they are just misinformed and undereducated. And, they have some responsibility for that, but they don't hold all the responsibility for that. And I think that Joaquin Phoenix's character is written very realistically. I think he cares about his community. He's trying to do what's best for it. He's just misinformed. And so to hear people online say, this movie was bad because I couldn't even feel bad for this guy, I just think that sucks. And I think that's a shitty way to be and to think about people. And so I don't think his character is one note at all. I think that his character is complicated because he says these things that I really disagree with. And I would have in 2020, I would have argued with him on Facebook about it if I had to. But I also see him do these things for his community that shows that he really does care about people and that he really does care about his community and what happens to it. And so I think that there are a lot of people out there that are like that. And if we want to stop them from saying the stupid shit, we can't just write them off and not have sympathy for them. We have to understand that it comes from a place of being misinformed and sometimes undereducated on different things. And so we have to feel sympathy for these people, and we have to understand them, and we have to talk to them and be honest and open with them. And I think, and through those conversations like that, I think you'll be amazed at how many people can change and be different and not say that stupid shit anymore. And I've seen that. I've seen that in my own life. I've seen that in people I know, And so it sucked to see people say that about Joaquin Phoenix's character. Another thing that a lot of reviewers have a problem with in this movie is they say it's the ultimate fence-sitting movie. They say that it's saying that both sides are bad and you should be in the middle. And I just think that is a misunderstanding of the movie. I think that's taking it way too much at face value and not thinking about it any more than what was actually just physically on the screen when you watched it. I think the ending of this movie directly kind of spits in the face of that, because it's funny because the ending of this movie is so absurd. It's during the BLM protest, I knew people that lived in towns of 200 people saying things like, well, if Antifa shows up around here, they're going to learn we've got guns and stuff, And that's the attitude of the people of Eddington as well. And the ending of this movie is an actual some Antifa militant group that's funded by some secret billionaire shows up and their goal is to kill all the cops in Eddington. And it's it's so absurd and silly that it's obviously showing that that is not real. That is not something that ever happened, but that's something that right-wing media and places like Fox News and stuff told people was going to happen. I saw people posting about that they were scared that looters were going to come to their house, and they lived in the middle of the woods in Arkansas. These people were so scared. And so I think people saw that and saw other moments where the movie is kind of making fun a little bit of teenagers who get involved in movements without fully understanding them, and seeing white people trying to be white saviors in these different movements. And they immediately are oh, this movie is sitting on the fence and is saying that we're both bad. And it's no, the movie is super obviously being super critical of right-wing media. I mean, that's what, to me, at least my understanding, that's what the whole end of the movie is about. There are parts throughout the movie where they're poking fun at both sides, but the whole, last 30 minutes of the movie is making fun of these crazy conspiracy theories that people had during COVID. It's making fun of the Antifa fear and the fear that a lot of people had that looters were going to come to their house, even when they lived hundreds of miles away from the nearest protest. I just don't understand how you can watch the movie and be oh, this movie is sitting on the fence, it's not making any statement at all. What does the end of the movie mean then? Is the end of the movie did Ari Aster just say, yeah, I'm going to make a movie about Antifa? If you think this movie is sitting on the fence, then please tell me what the last 30 minutes of the movie is about. or the last 45 minutes of the movie probably. Like, what is that about? It has no meaning. It has no larger meaning. It's not making fun of these conspiracy theories. I have to know what it's about if it's not doing that. And a large chunk of the movie is doing that exactly. So to me, the movie is not sitting on a fence. It does, and it does poke fun at the right and the left at different moments in the movie, but then it takes a huge chunk of it to poke a lot of fun at one side in particular. To say that Ari Aster is sitting in the middle in this movie, I think is just a little silly. I think it's not, not taking into account the movie in its entirety. I think if you watched, 30 minutes in the middle of the movie, then maybe you feel that way. But when you watch the whole movie, I don't think he's doing that at all. Okay, so now we know my qualms with some of the reviews for this movie. And, I saw some of those reviews and was nervous to see the movie. So I hope that the reviews didn't stop you from going to watch the movie. Now I want to talk about what I liked about the movie. And I think I really, really liked the cinematography in this movie. I think there's a lot of cool stuff that they did. I think what they did a really good job of was using focus to tell the story a lot. I think that they did a great job of using foreground elements and using focus to help scenes feel really impactful. The scene where Joaquin Phoenix goes into the mayor's bar for the second time and the homeless man is broken in there and he's, drinking out of every bottle, smashing stuff. There's a shot for, 30, 45 seconds, maybe a minute. And it's the homeless man in the foreground, out of focus, doing his thing. And you just see in focus Joaquin Phoenix looking at him for, an extended period of time. And I think there are several different scenes like that in the movie. And I think that it's just such a smart decision to do things like that in those moments where it's smart to do because it's understanding that in that moment, even though the action of the scene is this homeless man breaking things and drinking and stuff, the important part of the scene is what is happening to Joaquin Phoenix's character in this moment. Directly after this, he ends up shooting the homeless man. And without that moment where we have all the focus on him, I think that scene is not as impactful. We, as the audience, we got to sit there and spend a moment, focusing on him, seeing, trying to understand what's happening in him. And then that next scene becomes even more shocking, but then also we feel like we understand it a little more because we spent time, we spent a couple seconds, some time looking at him, trying to understand what was happening to him in that moment. I think that, the night scenes in the movie are shot really well. The ending action sequence, is so fun and so wacky and weird and crazy, but the cinematography is really cool. There's several different shots showing a phone filming something in this movie, and I think they did a really good job of that. I think that there's a lot of times in movies that doesn't end up so well, and they did a great job of that in this movie. So kudos to the DP on this movie because it was great. I loved a lot of the stuff they did, especially though the scenes where they use focus to really, point us to a character and show us that something emotionally is happening in them. And then, of course, during the action sequence at the end of the movie, it was amazing. I think another thing about this movie that I haven't really seen anyone talk about is just the location and the sets in this movie are so good. There is so much that goes into every location in this movie that just makes it perfect. During the movie, there's a scene where Joaquin Phoenix is cooking and he's in his kitchen and there's a huge old box TV on the counter, pushed in the corner, and he has his phone leaning against it watching a recipe video on TikTok or something. And just little details like that just are so good and made the movie so much better. And so all the people that were involved in that, the production design and the set dressing and all that, they just did such a good job. It just does such a good job of getting you into Eddington, transporting you there, and it really helps you also understand the characters immediately from all their different places, from their places of work, from the places they live. And yeah, they just did a great job overall in all the production design in this movie. So some of the things I don't like. Any movie that has Emma Stone and Austin Butler in it should have them in the movie as much as possible. And this movie sadly does not have enough of them in it. I understand that their characters are not the main characters in the movie, but it is so disappointing to go into the movie expecting, Austin Butler to be like this cult leader that I'm going to see a lot of and learn a lot about, and really only have one extended scene with him, one scene with him in it for an extended period of time. And man, I mean, when he's on screen, he does such a good job of capturing your attention and being interesting. And so you just want to learn more about him. You want to learn more about the movement that he kind of has, but you don't get that. And that, I hate that. And obviously Emma Stone is amazing. And I like their arc. I like her story, but I do wish that she'd been in the movie more, just because I expected her to going into it. And so maybe that's my fault, but I do wish that Austin Butler and Emma Stone were in it a little bit more. I think another thing about this movie I would have liked a little bit more of was, there's this mayoral race going on between Pedro Pascal and Joaquin Phoenix, and COVID is a big part of this movie. And in the backdrop, there is this tech company that's trying to get their data center built in Eddington. I would have loved to see a little bit more about that. I would have loved to see a little bit more how the rest of the town felt about it. We know how Pedro Pascal felt about it. We know how Joaquin Phoenix's character felt about it. But we don't really get a sense of what the larger town thinks. We see some of that, a very little of that, but I would have loved to dive into that a little bit more. Right now, that is such a big problem in communities. Even close to home here in Arkansas, in Memphis, they built a data center, and it is using the resources of communities, and they don't want it. That is just such a big issue right now, these data centers that are being built, and they use a lot of resources. And so I would have loved to see Ari Aster explore that a little bit more, critique that a little bit more. And I don't think, I think obviously he's doing that because it's in the movie, but it doesn't have a large focus on it. And that's because there's a lot already going on in this movie, so I understand it. But I do wish that there was more of a critique on that and talk about that just a little bit more in the movies. Would have loved to see maybe even a little bit more about the company that's behind it. But I understand why it isn't. The movie is already, kind of getting kind of long. There's a lot going on in it. So something had to kind of not be in there, and that was it. But I would have loved to see a little bit more about that in the movie as well. So yeah, that's it. So that's what I wanted to talk about Eddington. Again, I think that Ari Aster took a step in the right direction with this movie. I think that he learned a lot from Beau is Afraid, specifically when it comes to inserting comedy into his movies, because I think that he knows what's funny, and I feel like Beau is Afraid probably had more jokes in it than this movie, but I laughed more in this movie because of the timing and because of some of the cuts were just so good and so funny. And so I think that Ari Aster's next movie, if he doesn't go back to horror, if it's another movie that's in the same vein as this and Beau is Afraid, I think will be really incredible. And so I'm excited to see it. I'm excited to see what he does next. I'm excited to hear what you thought about Eddington. I would love for you to comment and tell me what you thought, if you loved or hated the movie, or you're somewhere more in the middle on it. And let me know what you think about Ari Aster too. Do you think that he sat on the middle too much in this film? Do you think that he's lost his touch and he should go back to making horror movies? Or was he bad at that too, maybe? I don't know. So yeah, let me know in the comments. I haven't posted as much as I've wanted to. Summer is a busy time at my job, so I'm going to be posting more. I'm going to talk about Superman soon because I watched that and I have a lot to say about it. And a lot of other people had a lot to say about it too, and I want to talk about that as well. So be on the lookout for that Superman review coming up. And we've got the 48-Hour Film Festival coming up next weekend too. So we are going to be making some videos about that for sure after it screens and after we get through with it. So yeah, be looking for that. So thanks, and see you guys next time.